Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I spent a good portion of today trying to decide what I was going to talk about in today's video. And it kind of fell into my lap as I was on Twitter today. I follow the education topic on Twitter simply because it helps keep me in the loop of the things that are going on in school. Sometimes I get ideas about it. Sometimes I just get a lot of entertainment out of reading the teacher threads, and this was one of those times. So what you're seeing here where it says actual textbook is this was a teacher replying to another teacher, and he was showing photos of a textbook. Now, someone else had asked him what textbook it was, and he had originally replied American Pageant. And I went on to look up American Pageant, and it turns out that it would have had to have been American Pageant Volume 17, because that one was written in 2019. The 16th one was written in 2015, so that would have been too early to talk about Trump. But that is what this teacher said. But oddly enough, he then deleted it when he said which textbook it was. Later on, I went back, and that tweet was no longer there where he was saying which textbook it was. Gee, I wonder why. Now, I can't verify that if that was the actual textbook that was used, but that is what the teacher who posted this originally said. So when I went on to read what was in this textbook, I tweeted out, "Homeschool your children. School is nothing but indoctrination, and many teachers are proud of it." And really, I think that we're seeing that more and more as time goes on. Teachers are very proud of the fact that they are indoctrinating your children into their own beliefs. So let's just take a look at what this textbook has to say. Trump in power. Following an inaugural address that pugnaciously asserted his nationalist, protectionist, and nativist agenda, Trump's first months in office were chaotic. So just this first sentence here shows you that the president is being written about in a very negative light. Now, let's just remember that I talk about textbooks all the time, and I talk about how they are boring and how they are really hard to capture your attention. And one of the reasons for this is because textbooks typically try, at least they're supposed to, objectively stick to the facts. That's why there are a lot of times just little snippets of information. It doesn't get a lot of feeling into it because they should not be. Textbooks are written for schools. They are supposed to be objective. But as we can see just from this first sentence here, that this textbook is not even trying to be objective. So let's go on. It says the new president at first seemed more determined to take a wrecking ball, more negative lingo, to the despised Washington establishment than to honor his campaign promises or organize an orderly government. Though his party controlled both chambers of Congress as well as the White House, Republicans proved unable in early 2017 to accomplish their most cherished objective, the repeal of Obama's Affordable Care Act. It's an unbelievably complex subject, said an apparently dumbfounded, and a lot of people on Instagram today pointed out that they even spelled dumbfounded wrong. Anyway, said an apparently dumbfounded Trump. Nobody knew healthcare could be so complicated. No sanctions against China were forthcoming. It's interesting hearing them talk about China when it comes to Trump, when it seems like we've got some issues on the other end. Anyway, infrastructure spending went unmentioned. The promised wall along the Mexican border remained unbuilt. Trump's approval ratings drooped to the lowest levels ever recorded in a president's first year in office. The incoming administration seemed perplexedly unready to assume power. And as you can see, this is just completely negative information. As high-level officials came and went with baffling speed and hundreds of appointments went unfilled throughout the executive branch, I feel like I'm reading a tabloid. That is actually what I feel like I'm reading right now. I don't even feel like I'm reading a textbook. This reads like a tabloid to me. Trump's first White House chief of staff lasted just 6 months. His press secretary, this is like so small for me to see, His press secretary, 6 successive communications directors, and chief political strategist soon followed him out the door, as did his original Secretary of State, who lasted just over a year. Amid charges that he had misrepresented to Vice President Michael Pence the nature of his communications with Russian officials, there's that Russia again, Trump's first national security advisor resigned after less than a month in office and later pleaded guilty to a felony charge of lying to the FBI. Demoralized, Foreign Service officers departed the State Department in droves, as key offices stood empty in Washington, as well as in American embassies and consulates around the world. Now, we're not even finished, ladies and gentlemen. We are not even finished. And even if the student reading this had no idea how much of this was actually true, they still will easily get the idea that this administration, this president, is not looked upon in a very positive light by the publisher, by the writer of this textbook. And this is something that is being taught to children in schools. So anyway, it says Trump fired FBI Director James Comey in May 2000. Allegedly for mishandling the Hillary Clinton email probe, but later admitting that his real motive was to deflect Comey's investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 election. I would really like to see where he admitted that. Anyway, which some observers thought might ultimately expose connections between the Trump campaign and the Russians, which it never did. In the wake of Comey's dismissal, the Justice Department appointed former FBI Director Robert Mueller as special counsel to continue the Russian investigation, a waste of taxpayer money, which continued to cast a lingering shadow over the new administration's legitimacy. The very heavens seemed to mirror the nation's tumult. I don't even know how to say that. Isn't that terrible? In 2017, as epic hurricanes blasted Puerto Rico, Florida, and the Gulf Coast, and monster wildfires blazed across the West, consuming thousands of homes and dozens of lives. So do you get that, people? The very heavens seem to mirror the nation's tumult. So even God, or maybe Mother Nature, as this author might look to, didn't like the fact that he was elected, and the heavens were showing it. At least that is the impression that you get from reading this, what is supposed to be objective textbook. Anyway, though climate change and the warming of the world's oceans surely played a role in those disasters, the Trump administration gave a welcoming embrace to climate skeptics. So, and that's the last page that was actually pictured. So I don't know what it reads after that. But you get the idea. This is atrocious for this to be taught to children in schools. No matter what you think of the president, there should never be a textbook that is blatantly written to emphasize one agenda over another. And I know it's difficult for textbooks. A lot of textbooks will show some sort of bias, but this one doesn't even try to hide it. And the sad part about all of this is that it is a teacher who is merrily sharing this on Facebook as if it's something to be proud of. So if you have kids in school, this is what they're learning. You wonder why we have so many kids who seem to be completely off the rails and have a complete hatred for the administration that we're living under right now. And again, I just want to say that it doesn't matter what you feel about the president. No matter which side it would be on, these textbooks are supposed to be objective. This textbook was written with an agenda. So anyway, the original teacher who posted it on Twitter, he noticed that I had retweeted his picture. So he replied to me and he said, "I teach history because I have studied it and understood it and continue to do so my whole life. I look at new scholarship and spend my summers reading history by the ton so I can make sure my students have access to the best interpretations in the field. But yeah, homeschool them." So right there, we have a very condescending attitude towards homeschoolers, as if, or people in general, I think, who don't have that degree that he seems to be relying so heavily upon, as if people can't get out there and read themselves. Anyone who's visited my channel before, you know how much I love to read. You know how I talk about books all the time and how I mention books and how I give you book lists. I talk about them on Instagram. I am reading constantly, but he seems to really try to undermine the education that a child can get if they're not in school. And it's very elitist. And that's like, it's just a product of the whole technocracy that we're dealing with right now. People are looking to their degrees that, let's face it, are bought more than they're actually earned. And they are thinking that that somehow qualifies them more when in fact anybody can get out there and read history books. So anyway, I was trying to be civil though when I replied. So I just said, I spend a large amount of time studying history too. It's a passion of mine, one that I never had until I started homeschooling my children. So yeah, I did try to throw that in there to let him know, hey, school history didn't interest me. Hopefully you can agree that this textbook is far from objective as textbooks should be. And this was his response. What in that passage was false? That's right, folks. The extremely biased textbook passage that I just read to you, he's not interested in that at all. He's not interested in the obvious liberal bias, obviously, because he feels the same way about the president. But that was his response. What in that passage was false? He has no issue indoctrinating his students. He agrees with it. Why would he have an issue with it? So I just answered, the entire thing is an exaggerated liberal tirade. Bias has no place in any textbook or in any classroom. And that is really the gist of it. These people are supposed to be educating your children. They're not supposed to be brainwashing them. They're not supposed to be telling them which political opponent they should choose or not choose. They are supposed to be giving them the facts, and they are not supposed to be giving them facts in a way that is going to sway them. But what is happening is that these teachers, someone asked on Instagram, why are these teachers allowed to teach the narrative like this? And that is actually a very simple question. Teachers are allowed to push this narrative because that is what they have been trained to do. They have been trained to push this narrative. Just as these students of theirs are being indoctrinated, they were likely also indoctrinated throughout all of their school years and throughout the universities. Look at the universities nowadays. Even if they had graduated a while back, these universities have been very liberal for decades. So these teachers were trained to do this. In one of my other videos, I had talked about how I believe it was the teachers union, was encouraging educators to not think of themselves as educators, but to think of themselves as agents of change. What is an agent of change? Well, an agent of change is an activist. So these teachers are not, when they are in the classroom, thinking of themselves as educators. They are thinking of themselves as activists, and they are bringing up an army of youth soldiers for themselves. So anyway, this is just to show that, yeah, this person says that they're a teacher. And the reason that I scribbled out the name, even though, it's right on Twitter, it's a public account. It's not like it's private or anything. But I just scribbled it out just because I feel like on YouTube, I reach more people on YouTube. And I don't want to get this person fired or anything like that. I just want to let everyone know that this is what is being taught to kids in schools. Now, if you've stuck around long enough, here's the clincher. Because we all seem to look at this as being public education. And I talk about public education all the time. I talk about government education and how government education was always meant to indoctrinate. It was meant to create obedient factory workers. And I think a lot of people know that. So what they do is they pull their kids out of government schools. And since they don't want to homeschool them, if they have the money to do it, they put them in private schools and think, okay, well, they're safe now. Well, not so fast, because I figured that someone, after I made this video, would say to me, well, hey, how do you know this person is actually a teacher? Anyone can say anything on Twitter, and you don't know if that's actually true. And yeah, that is the case. So I did look up this person just to see if they were an actual teacher because it gives the name and it gives the town and the state. And I thought I'm just going to double check this before I go and make this video. And sure enough, he is a history teacher, and he is a history teacher at a private school. Did you hear that? A private school, not a public school, not a government school. Now, again, I don't know if this is the textbook that he is using in his classroom. I have no idea. He might have just been showing this textbook because he happened to like this version. So I don't know if that's what he's using with his students. But nevertheless, if he is happy to share that other information, that other textbook, we can only imagine what the students are being taught in his class. And I also happened to notice an interesting tidbit of information that his wife is also a history teacher at that private school. So parents, honestly, I know that a lot of you have put your kids in private school with the belief that they're safe there. But in all honesty, the only way to know for sure what your kids are learning in school is if you take them out of school completely and educate them yourselves. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one over on Instagram or here on my YouTube community tab because YouTube disables my comments. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.